aside, I took the challenge. The difficult and heartbreaking challenge of writing my little brother's eulogy. If I may, I want to begin with a story that happened the following week of Alan's passing. It was a Friday morning, and I found myself lying in bed, caught in the in-between space of almost conscious and yet still very much asleep. It's the place where reality is suspended and the imagination is molded by what was, what is, and the infinite possibilities of what could be. As I lay silently, I heard the laughter of a young boy echoing outside the courtyard of my New York City apartment. The familiarity of this noise, the sound of innocence, excitement, and uninhibited joy struck me down deep to my core. Immediately, my body was transported to my 13-year-old self, lying in bed, outraged and livid with the ruckus Alan was making in the living room of our 3-bedroom apartment in Eulogy. 252, he yells, mimicking the audibles a quarterback would call during a play. The flurry of his footsteps would reverberate throughout the house and plunge me deeper into frustration. In my dream state, I get out of the bed and storm the hall, ready to raise hell. In the living room, I find Alan decked out in what appears to be makeshift football gear from household items. Shoulder pads consisting of a white extra-large t-shirt stuffed with pillows and 2 hangers. A pair of pants twice his size, fastened to his waistline by a single shoestring. And finally, to complete the ensemble, my football helmet, which was obviously too big for him and made him look like a life-size bobblehead. In hindsight, yes, I was angry that he woke me up. But I do have to applaud his ingenuity and his creativity. I hide behind the wall and watch him run back and forth, back and forth. "Coach!" he would yell to himself, fully immersed in character, or rather characters, as I should say, because he often played the roles of coach, player, referee, and sometimes even water boy. As I gaze from behind the wall, the anger subsides, and I begin to laugh at the silliness of it all. His childlike innocence softens my heart. This little boy was beyond reproach. And then suddenly I begin to cry. The dream world collapsed in on me, and I woke up sobbing in unrelenting fashion. Dreams can only go so far until reality sets in. And in this instance, I was confronted with the reality that Alan is no longer here. That my little brother is no longer here. It is said that we can know and understand our truest, most authentic self by merely reflecting on the moments of our infancy and adolescence. I'm going to repeat that. It is said that we can know and understand our truest, most authentic self by merely reflecting on the moments of our infancy and adolescence. If that is correct, then Alan was full of life and full of love. I can remember the very first moments this chubby, blonde, curly-haired baby came into our lives. I can still see the opulent green hues in his eyes, reflecting the gentle and vigorous spirit of a boy who had so much to give to this world. With unceasing passion, my little brother knew no limits. His imagination was infinite, his will persistent, and his love abundant and freely given. Alan Chase Jennings was gifted to the world on December 28, 1998, born by his biological parents, Kana and Carmen Jennings. The old adage goes, it takes a village to raise a child, and with Alan Boy, that statement could never have rang more true. Had it not been for the many hands of our uncles and aunties, our family could not have been successful in raising Alan alone. However, from my perspective, Alan's story begins with the matriarch of our Ainga, the late Jeanette Jane Scanlon. As a child, I have this vivid imagery of going to Grandma Scanlon's apartment in Camp 4 housing and seeing Alan sitting on her lap. He would smile and laugh infectiously as Grandma would pick him up and play with him and sing songs to him. Sa bali bali means go for a walk. Tala means too much talk. Alofia to means I love you. Take it easy, five, and woo. My grandmother loved this boy. It was a passionate, unrelenting, reckless, sacrificial type of love. A signature trademark, the resilient woman she was. The love that she poured out into Alan sowed seeds that later came to fruition, as Alan later embodied that very same passionate, unrelenting, reckless, sacrificial love. In recognizing their love, we honor their memories and invoke the essence of that love today. Alan came into our lives when I was 5 years old. Biologically, Alan was my cousin, but he was Hanai by my family. Hanai is a word in Olelo Hawaii that is commonly interpreted as adopted. However, its actual meaning is so much more rich. When translated, Hanai means to raise, rear, feed, nourish, sustain. To raise, as in the countless times my sister sat with Alan and helped him with his homework, teaching him how to read and write and do math. To rear, as in those times I would walk him to basketball practices and then teach him moves that our older brother had taught me. To feed, as in the food my older brother provided by working long hours from the time he was a teenager, leading into his adulthood. To nourish, as in the love my mother lavished on this boy because he was so desperately in need of love. To sustain, as in our family pouring out all that we had and giving this boy all that we could so that he could thrive in life. In this essence, and in the spirit of the word Hanai, Alan was never my cousin, but was always my little brother. But we weren't alone in nourishing him. As a child, one could easily say that Alan's greatest joy was spending time at Uncle Jimmy and Auntie Marlene's house. There, he got to play with his cousin Austin. As children born within several days of one another, Alan and Austin were thick as thieves. Uncle Jimmy and Auntie Marlene opened up their home and provided a caring atmosphere for Alan to continue to grow and to flourish. Holidays were some of the best memories as we spent Thanksgiving, Christmases, and New Year's Eve together in their home. I can still see the joy and glimmer in Alan's eyes every Christmas when Auntie Marlene would pull out a birthday cake and we would sing happy birthday to Austin and Alan. In this, Alan knew he was deeply loved. But it wasn't always cakes and fairy tales. Anyone who truly knew Alan was difficult to raise. As a child, it seemed as if Alan had an inexhaustible source of energy. Alan would quite literally bounce off of the walls. And if you told him not to, this kid would take it as a personal challenge and do it anyway, knowing full well the consequences of his actions. My mother recalls several moments of Alan doing this. The first involved him playing with another boy. The two came across a red anthill, and my mother yelled, "Alan, don't go near the anthill." What does Alan do? Jumps on top of it, full force, barefoot and all. Not only did he get bit, he got licking for not listening, which should be a lesson to all the children in here. Listen to your parents. In another instance, we were at one of Aaron's basketball games. Alan wanders to the side of the gym, and my mom tells him, "Alan, stay away from the fire alarm." Then, in the heat of the game, the fire alarm sounds. And where do we find Mr. Jennings but holding the switch, caught like a deer in the headlights? But that was Alan. He wasn't afraid to push the limits. He was a deeply curious person, and in retrospect, he was a rebel in his own right, always in pursuit of something tangible and concrete. His inexhaustible energy proved to be useful in sports. As with my brother and I, my mother enrolled Alan into sports so that he could be exposed to good male role models and channel his energy into something productive. Alan participated in multiple community leagues, including AYSO Soccer, Pop Warner Football, and the formerly known Mililani Basketball Association. Whatever the sport, Alan was known for his ability to run from one end of the field or court to the other and back. Whether he accomplished anything, it varied, but it was his heart and dedication that made him a valuable asset to the teams that he was a part of, to which I'm sure some of you here today can attest to. Alan was deeply rooted in his community, or communities as I should say. Alan was raised in Mililani. He attended Kipapa Elementary School, Mililani Middle School, and graduated from Mililani High School in 2017. As he got older, Alan started to attend church with his childhood friend, Nicholas Cope, and the rest of the Cope Ohana. In going to youth services, youth events, and Bible studies, Alan took initiative to cultivate his own faith, which deeply informed and advanced who he was and how he chose to live in this world. He also taught himself how to play ukulele, guitar, and bass. Alan played football for Mililani. It cannot be understated that his greatest source of pride was playing football as a Trojan for Mililani High School. When I was playing football and my mom was team mom, Alan was practically raised around Mililani High School football. Having been raised around that environment, it was evident that playing football was something Alan dreamed of for quite some time. Alan was loved by his teammates and his coaches, and he was a proud Trojan at heart. During Alan's high school years, our family moved to Ma'ili after my mother was able to build an accessible house of her own, a handicapped accessible house, Alan was instrumental in building not only our house, but countless other houses for families he didn't even know. For nearly 5 years, Alan showed up every weekend in the blistering hot sun, performing back-breaking and strenuous labor so that our family and other families could have a home of their own. He was freely giving of his time and his energy. Alan had a strong sense of kuleana to our family and to the future homes these homes would provide for generations to come. It was during this time that Alan's birth family moved back to Hawaii from California. Alan was happy that his family had finally moved back home. Over the course of 6 to 7 years, Alan was able to rebuild relationships with his family, something my mother had always desired for Alan and knew he needed for his healing and own well-being. Alan enjoyed going diving with his older brother Blake and spending time with his sister Chanel. Alan was also excited to navigate a new role, which was being an older brother to Dayton and Kiana. Within the last couple of years, Alan also became an uncle, a role in which he thrived because he loved his nephews, Kana'i and Kasten. Lastly, and it goes without saying, Alan deeply loved his birth parents, Auntie Carmen and Apakana. In recent years, Alan worked 2 jobs, both at Second Save Nanakuli and Consolidated Theater in Kapolei. He worked to support our family, always giving the bulk of his checks to help around with the house and groceries. When Alan was hired at Waihata, he was excited. He would wake up in the early hours of the morning to catch the bus from Ma'ili to Sand Island for work, and he did this faithfully for months. When he saved up enough money, he bought himself a car, his first car. The last time I saw my little brother was on August 28th, a little over a week before his death. I was scheduled to fly back to New York, and no one in our house could take me to the airport except Alan. When my mother suggested it, I laughed and said, "Nah, my brother dropped the $80 to get an Uber." Driving in our house has always been a rite of passage, and the rite of passage was followed by hazing. My mom did it to Aaron did it to me, and I did it to Alan. The only one in our house who didn't get hazed was Christy, because we all know, without a doubt, that she's the best driver out of all of us. Nevertheless, Alan was my only option, and so he ended up giving me a ride. God knows I was sweating bullets and shitting brakes. But Alan was proud. He was proud that he had his own car. He was proud that he was driving me to the airport. When Alan pulled up at the airport, he handed me cash and said, "This is for you." Alan knew that living in New York City was hard for me, and most times I was struggling, working my 2 jobs and still going to classes. When I think about that moment, there are a lot of negotiations I make in my head, but at the end of the day, I had an opportunity that most people in this room will never have. I got to say goodbye. What happened to Alan was incomprehensible. There's simply no way to make sense of it. Even as you sit here now, my family and I can empathize with you. We feel the weight of affect and emotions coursing through each and every one of you right now. Alan was special to you, just as he was special to us. Some would say that this is a tragedy, and quite frankly it is. It's a tragedy when we walk past his bedroom door and dread the awful truth that he's not inside. It's a tragedy when we pull up to the driveway and see his car sitting vacant on the side of the road. It's a tragedy when our family is unable to truly grieve the loss of our own because of circumstances outside of our control. Yes, it is a tragedy indeed, but Alan's story doesn't end here. Despite everything that has happened, we still choose love. And when we choose love, Alan's legacy lives on. At the request of my mother, I'd like to conclude this eulogy by speaking this scripture over you. And be kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, as God in Christ has forgiven you. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Amen.
Amen.